evening. Welcome. Our chief guest today is Dr. K Radhakrishnan, former chairman, Space Commission, Secretary, Department of Space, and former chairman, ISRO. He'll be speaking to us on the promise of space technology for India. To chair the session, we have Sri C. K. Suresh, founder director of ATMA Foundation. Our keynote speaker today needs no introduction. Who does not know Dr. K. Radhakrishnan, former chairman of ISRO, the man behind the success of the Chandrayaan-1 and the Mangalyaan? It is a great honor and pleasure, sir, to welcome you to this session.
Thank you, Parvati. May I humbly request, with all reverence, to address Dr. Radhakrishnan to address our keen audience. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, Founder Dr. Suresh and all members of ATMA Foundation, all the viewers who are present here, and all those who are going to see this YouTube channel in the subsequent days. I'm extremely happy to join this session, especially with a very positive message that you are passing on to the younger generation on a new hope, on new strength, new challenges, and new resolutions. And I would add new resilience in the current context. Let me first share with you, I knew this founder Suresh as a young student, and that was in 1979 when I met him first. I could see a divine brilliance in him, and it was clear he is going to be somebody with a difference. And I'm extremely happy today at the way this ATMA Foundation has grown, and the three key words that are used: welfare, development, and empowerment. Now, also, I'm happy to see the reach around the country, and I'm sure it will spread further in the coming days, months, and year. The question is how space technology becomes relevant in the series of talks that ATMA has arranged. The answer lies in the first slide that I'm going to now show to you. When we talk about space technology, there are different concepts that people have. But to me, it enables us to learn more about the humanity. It helps us to serve the humanity better. And also in the process, it raises the level of science and technology in this country or in any country. And science and technology are engines of development. And here, being engaged in this activity for the last 50 years, I feel that there has been a purpose in life. And in India, we say, the world say, that space touches the lives of everyone. And that's what I'm going to share with you through the slides. Next one. Space is a vastness that starts around 100 kilometers above the surface of our Earth. But it goes through the solar system, through the galaxies, to the entire universe. And essentially, it is the understanding that we gain about this universe that's the first and foremost part of space research activity. And of course, we use the word rocket science. Rocket science symbolizes something which is very complex, of which we have less understanding, And in the world, the rocket science developed to such an extent in 1957 that the humanity was able to put an artificial satellite around the Earth. A rocket with sufficient power to take it beyond the gravity influence of Earth. And that was in 1957. And then if you look at the developments that world saw in this area, in 1967, a human being was put into Earth's orbit. In 1969, the humans landed on Moon. In 1971, humans were able to put a spacecraft around Mars. And in 1981, we saw the reusable space shuttle doing its mission, coming back to Earth and getting ready for another mission. On the other side, we saw also these artificial satellites being used for different applications. 1963 came the first communication satellite. In 1972 came a satellite that could see several things happening on the Earth, from vegetation to paddy fields to wheat fields to the oceans to the water resources, etc., etc. And we also got in 1993 the first navigation satellite, the Global Positioning System. Now, this is what happened in the world. And these were the first. And this age is called the modern space age. What was happening in India during this period? Can I have the next slide? While the modern space age began in 1957, India rightly thought that we should get into this field. Not for those intentions of the developed countries of the bipolar world to compete with each other to show one-upmanship. But here, it was for development, welfare, empowerment. Use of this frontier stuff technology for finding solutions to the problems of man and society. And that is the USP of Indian space program, the bedrock of Indian space program. We use a frontline technology to find solutions to the society's problems and the human beings' problem. And we had the first small rocket taking off from Tumba in 1963. That was a foreign rocket. But by the end of the 1960s, we had our own rocket taking up. That was just 32 kilograms. It went like a projectile. But if you look at the rockets that we have today, the rockets that you see during the launches on the television channels, they are majestic ones. The PSLV, which you have been seeing regularly, the GSLV, and the GSLV Mark III. The GSLV Mark III weighs about 640 tons when it is on the launch pad, as compared to the 32 kilogram small rocket that we had. And this GSLV Mark III is able to put a satellite of about 4,000 kilograms into an orbit which is there for us to use it for communication purposes. It's a majestic one. And if you talk about a low Earth orbit, like 1,000 kilometers around the Earth, it can put about 10 to 12 tons. And that is the development that India had over these years. More of it is seen in the next slide. From a small beginning that we made in the 1960s, we came to the application of the satellites, building of satellites, and developing the capability to launch them from India. And these were the steps of 1970s, the SITE SLV3 Aryabhatta projects. We had a number of missions over this period. And we had a focus on using the satellites for communication, using them for observing the Earth or remote sensing and navigation. We had a vision. The most important part of the development that we had over the decades is there was a vision that we are going to use space technology in this country for development, and that will be with self-reliance. And this vision was shared by all generations that followed, of leadership, of members, and of the nation. We were also very clear when we have resources that are not a luxury for us, we should be able to focus on what is more important. And in life, focus is most important. Along with self-reliance, we also developed in the organization team excellence. It is not the individual's excellence that alone matters, but it is how they work as a team of specialists of different domains. And the last point is this rocket science. There are risks, there are failures, we learn from failures, and how one should be, as an organization, resilient to these failures. How do we come up? So we had a series of successes and also initial failures, and we came up. That is number one. So the lesson number one is when we look at a complex, challenging situation, one should be daring to do it, one should be prepared to do it, and one should learn from the failures and move forward. It is this challenge that gives the inner strength to the person, to the organization, to do better and to do more demanding things. So from these small rockets, small satellites, to complex satellites and rockets which are going around the Earth, we went to the next step. In the year 2003, we started looking at Moon, which is 4 lakh kilometers away from Earth. And ISRO, India, did it excellently well in the year 2008. That was the first major step forward in going beyond the Earth's gravitational field, sphere of influence. And by 2010, India decided that we should look at Mars, which is far, far away, a very complex mission. 50 million kilometers when Mars is close to us, 400 million kilometers when it is farthest. It takes about 300 days to reach there. It requires very high level of precision to reach there. It was a challenging mission. Many had tried, failed. We learned from that. And also we learned from our own experiences. And India was the country to do it in the first attempt successfully. And we took about 4 years from concept to fruition. It was a demonstration of team excellence that took us there. So we developed. While the space applications continued to be our bedrock, we developed capabilities, our aspirations went up, the world also developed, and India too equally went up. And in the world, India got a prominent place. And if you look at the global scenario of the countries who are into space activity, there is USA, we have Russia, European Consortium, European Space Agency of nearly 25 countries there. We have Japan, China, India, then comes Canada, etc., etc. And in the next step, the space applications, how we use this technology for the humanity, India became the role model. That is the next slide. Next slide. Look at these areas where India got into. Communication satellites, the INSAT series which came from 1980s, made a revolution in this country in providing communication infrastructure. And if you look at the early 80s, we had hardly black and white TVs transmitted in 4 metros in this country. And today we look at the way the broadcasting systems have developed, the way we used satellite system for spreading education or for data connectivity, all came through the communication satellite series, INSAT. Monitoring of natural resources, forests, agricultural field, water resources, oceans, all are today done using the satellites. And the most important thing is all the agencies in the government of India and the state governments make use of this. They have institutions to make use of this. It is part of their value chain. Meteorological observations you see regularly. The ability to predict the weather, the ability to understand the cyclones, the disasters, all have become possible with the power of satellites that we have today. Similarly, understanding the environment and also to see the climate change, these satellites are contributing in a major way. GPS is well known as a navigation system. That's a system of America. There is a GLONASS of Russia. There is a Galileo of Europe. And India decided to have its own navigation system. It's called NAVIC, essentially for assured navigation signals. And that also helps, along with remote sensing and communication, to provide location-based services. And if you look at the governance in this country, the geospatial data services have become a part and parcel of it. The government at the national level or at the local level or at the grassroots level are using today the spatial database that is generated from the satellites for planning the development activities, for monitoring the development activities. And normally during this period, we hear about cyclones. And if you ask the elderly people, those who were in the 70s, they would say cyclone meant a major disaster. And a cyclone could finish almost ten thousands of people because no one knew where it is going to strike. Initially, satellite provided the ability to communicate them. Yes, there is something happening. But today, the satellites provide that ability to country to say, oh, what is happening, how the system is coming up, how it is moving, how the cyclone is, and when it is going to hit, and which area is going to be in trouble, and how we could evacuate the people from those regions well in advance. And today, cyclones happen every year, but we hear a few casualties. So this has become part and parcel of our activity. And how this happened? Again, the space agency and all the user agencies work together. It is synergy that helped. It is the capacity building ability of these organizations to make use of this new technology. Institutional arrangements within the states and at various central agencies, and ability to do externalization, as I would say. The technologist doesn't take it as something close to their chest, but they spread this message and enable, empower everyone in government, non-governmental organization to make use of it. And this in a vast country with diversity in the terrain, in the culture, in the language, has been a success, and that became an example to the entire world. One can write a good scientific paper and publish. One can do a small pilot project in a place and demonstrate that. But to spread it to the entire country of the size of India and to make it part and parcel of the value chain of those people, those institutions, and that is where India excels. And this is where a space technology becomes useful for the humanity. While Mars or the Chandrayaan missions or Astrosat mission help us to know more about the universe, the solar system, the planets, etc., etc. This is where it helps the humanity. And that is India's USP, as I mentioned earlier. Can I have the next slide? Now we say, from the modern space age that began in 1957, the world is at the dawn of a new space age. And what is this new space age? And why do we call it a new space age? When the modern space age began, there was a bipolar world with the US and the Soviets at that time competing with each other. Many others joined with different intentions of using the space. But today we have new space protagonists who are into the cutting edge of the space activity. We hear about Elon Musk, an iconic figure in space. And his SpaceX has been doing wonderful work with the world's heaviest rocket, Falcon Heavy, with him. A Dragon spacecraft which could deliver the NASA's astronauts into the space station, that happened in 2020. And the Starlink of thousands of satellites in a low Earth orbit trying to develop a new communication system. The OneWeb small satellite constellation today jointly owned by UK and an Indian entrepreneur. There is a rocket lab, again, done by a protagonist. Blue Origin, which is making the lunar lander for NASA, which is going to be launched a few years from now, and Virgin Galactic. The important point is these are persons who have invested significant amount of money to do work in the cutting edge of space. And it is a paradigm change. Along with this, the modern space age itself is so very major developments. From the bipolar world, a few of 1950s, early 60s, we see today 72 national space agencies, more than 5,000 commercial firms into the space activity, and an economy of space which is close to 366 billion US dollar. That's the estimate of 2009, of which 70% comes from the commercial equipment and services. That itself has been a major paradigm change. And the world is cooperating. Joint space missions have come to stay. The International Space Station is a classic example of it, where a few space agencies came together to build it and make it available to a larger community to do different types of experiments. So the world is changing. And over the last 10 years, the world went through severe economic difficulties, but still the space economy has been growing and growing. That means it has become more relevant for governance and development around the world. And we see advances in technology. Technology is developing, it's advancing exponentially. Many of them help applications of space technology, and many of them are competing. So we have enabling technologies, competing technologies, and complementing technologies. A new dimension has come into the space activity, that is using it for strategic applications. We will come to it afterwards. Cyber threats. This is something which the space community is also looking at it. The space debris, pieces of satellites which are still going around in the orbits. The number is close to 20,000 pieces. Anthropogenic debris, they are classified. There is also cosmic debris, which are likely to come to the surroundings of Earth. So understanding this debris, trying to manage this debris, trying to protect the active satellites from this debris, these are all areas of today's concern. And if you look at the size of the space activity, there are at least 2,000 satellites which are in the orbit which still function. Next. So if you look at this new space age, I like to put them into 5 groups, 5 E's of the space age. One is exploration of the solar system, exploration of the universe, trying to understand more about life on Earth, the origin of life, trying to see whether there is any possibility of life in other celestial bodies, and to understand the cosmic hazards more. There is a new area which is coming up now, exploitation of the celestial resources, that is solar power and the moon and Mars becoming sources of mining and various other hydrocarbons. Habitat in space is coming up in a very major way, at least on moon, on Mars, whether the humanity could establish habitat in the coming few decades. This is an agenda. We also talk about the enterprise, the space assets, larger number of satellites to be built and launched, operated. It's a major enterprise. The ground systems required for that, and space tourism. So that is another type of activity. And the engagement for the human well-being. When we talk about the sustainable development goals, when you talk about understanding the climate change, satellites play a very major role. Space for security, surveillance, or for supremacy. And this is the 4th dimension of the warfare in the current world. And space governance becomes very important in this context. And finally, if you have to achieve all these 4 E's, we require the next one, engineering. That is rockets capable of putting heavy satellites, rockets which can also bring back the cargo or human beings safely, space robotics, and deep space gateway. That is, when we talk about habitat in the vicinity of moon or around Mars, how do we reach there? So these are all the agenda before the global space community. The next one, I will just say what India could look at. Next one, the prospects for India. Certainly, in space science, exploration missions, India has done well. Whether it is Astrosat, Chandrayaan missions, or Mars missions, or the missions that are being planned like Aditya. Solar power platforms is something where there is a lot of opportunity, and mining of celestial resources. These would become reality in a few decades from now. Human stay in space, we have made the beginning with the Mangalyaan program, trying to put a couple of human beings in an orbit around Earth for a few days. But how do we ensure longer stay of more people with ability to do experiments in space and return those people and the crew back? This is a very major challenge. And if these three have to happen, we also should have the ability to plan missions to take the spacecraft from our spaceport at Sriharikota to different orbits around the Earth and the other celestial bodies. And if we have to do good experiments, we require instruments and we require capable spacecrafts and powerful rockets. So these are all the things that are in front of us as opportunities and challenges. And what is there for the student community? The focus domains of the future are astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology, applied sciences, and different disciplines of engineering, mathematics, and astrobiology and bioastronautics. And these are all the areas where the new generation would find exciting challenges. Now, if you have to use the space for the engagement that we talked about, if you have to have that space enterprise, what are the elements of it? Build and operate constellation of satellites for different applications and have this synergizing institutional arrangements with user agencies, industry startups. And in the year 2020, we had in India a very major structural reform that enabled, that empowered the private sector and the brilliant startups to get into the space activity. So what is in store for them? Next one. Next slide. These are all the areas where one could contribute in a very major way into the space program. Can be partnering to manufacture those proven launchers and satellites, to innovate or develop new space applications and services, to build, operate the ground facilities for the space sector, make or develop ground equipment for space application, innovate, develop flyable subsystems, firmware, software, devices, processes, etc. And I see a lot of enthusiasm in the new generation to get into this area, innovate, develop flyable subsystem. What you require is a fertile mind. And the small satellites are making a very major headway world over. And if you have to make thousands of satellites, small ones, building them is an opportunity. Launching them is an opportunity. And the space provides a lot of opportunity for using those systems for the non-space applications, like the telemedicine that we talk about. Adapt and deliver those spin-off technologies to the non-space sector. We service a very major market there. And there is a set of soft services required: consultancy of space projects, management, space commerce, space law, etc., etc. These are all the new domains coming up. So there is a lot of opportunity, hard, soft, in the space in the coming years. Next one. I'll end up with a slide. What is the challenge if we have to have human in loop, human beings into the space? When we say we have space robotics, it does not have the cognitive capability today, while a human being has that ability. A human being, if put into Moon or even Mars, could take decisions then and there. But can we build that ability in the robots as cognitive robots? This is a major challenge. And why? Because it is difficult to take human beings and keep them safely and bring them safely, whereas it is easy to do that for a robot. And if you have to really take human beings, there are several things which we need to look at. So where is that optimum mix of the human in loop and the cognitive robot? And this is something towards the future the world will be looking at. And this is an exciting field. And as I said, when we use this space technology, finally for the human being's welfare, we feel great. Next one. And the last message that I wanted to convey is live with selfless service and leave a legacy behind. Whatever with the profession that we are engaged in, do that with a passion and with a selfless approach. And then you have a legacy to follow. Thank you. Wish you the very best for the year 2021 and move forward. We look for a better world in the future. And you are the makers of that better world. Thank you very much, Dr. Suresh. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And all the members who have been viewing this program, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Radhakrishnan, sir, for your very insightful session.
Sir, how you overcome the challenges in Mars mission?
See, in Mars mission, there were several challenges. If you look at the Mars mission elsewhere, it started in the 70s and there were several difficulties, several failures. First, reaching there itself is difficult because the distance. And when the distance is large, communication becomes another problem. It takes time for a signal to reach Mars, which could be even 20 minutes. So that was the second issue. And we also had to develop the rockets which were required to put such satellites. So all these areas we had to manage. And if you look at the MAVEN mission, which went along with our Mars orbiter mission, it's a good comparison. That was their 22nd mission, and we were going first time. They took 11 years from concept to fruition. And when they had done all the tests on the system, they were assembling the spacecraft for the launch. We were here starting our program itself. They had a rocket which had 10 times more capability than the PSLV that we had. And we had to do with PSLV. And essentially, you require to put a spacecraft in a place around Earth from which it can start the voyage to Mars. We didn't have that rocket. So we devised new ways of reaching there, using gravity to get out of gravity. That is something which we did. But it meant longer stay around the Earth with all associated problems. But we did that. So this is another area. And concept to fruition, we had to do this in 4 years. But we learned, and we learned as we progressed. So we had technological challenges. We had challenges in managing the mission. Navigation of this spacecraft from Earth to Moon and then Mars itself was a very major challenge, which we learned over these 300 days. So there were several things, and every day was a test for us. Every day was a learning for us. But we learned. We remained as students, the entire organization. And for us, it was an opportunity of the life. So we did it.
Thank you. ISRO is every Indian's pride. Still, this is a rather obvious question. India has a host of social and economic problems. Amidst all this, was it really necessary to go to Mars? Is the enormous expense justified? Will this bring more revenue to our nation someday?
This is a question which has been asked in the 60s, which continues to be asked. The 60s, the question was, when we have even development problems here, we are finding it difficult to get even food. Where do we get into it? The answer was, space for India was not an exotic thing. It is for development. It helps to produce more, to understand more about the Earth and its capabilities. So somebody asked me this question, whether it is rotis or rockets, what is the priority? I said in 2014 that in India, rockets are used for more rotis. So that continues. That is how I used that slide on the space applications, how the satellites are helping us. Now, you can ask this question, why do we go to moon? Why do we go to Mars, etc.? Understanding knowledge is one part of it. But when you do work on a cutting edge space exploration mission, we develop a lot of new technologies which later become useful for the satellites for this development applications. Remote sensing technology itself developed in that fashion. And the astronomers who were looking from Earth to the other objects started looking back to Earth. That became remote sensing. Specifically in Mars mission, I said we take about 20 minutes for a signal to reach that Mars, and the satellite has to manage by itself. And there are a couple of weeks every year when there is no visibility from Earth. So we have made that satellite as a smart satellite, which can take its own decisions. And those new techniques are today used in all our other satellites. So there is a lot of technological inputs that will come to the satellites which are serving the common man. So it's a progression. That is how we develop. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
And you said India used space science for humanity. India's USP is humanity. And now is a role model on this. Can you explain how we are different in this area compared to other leading space missions?
Yeah, that's what I told. One can write a good paper on how satellite data can be used to find out a school of fish in the ocean. One can develop algorithms to extract ocean color or sea surface temperature using the satellite data. That is one part of it. One can show that around Gujarat coast or Andhra coast and show that yes, my technique words I can find out the fish school. But if you have to make it used by the 50,000 fishing vessel owners every day, using the instruments that they carry with the compass or even the mobile phones, or simple a thread and a stone, translate into their language, and they make use of it. Like we get the milk, like we get the newspaper in the morning, they get the information at the fishing harbor before they start on a board that if you go in this direction, this distance, you get fish. And today, a vessel is able to save at least 5 to 10 lakhs per year in fuel. And this reaches the common man. Now, this translation of the science finally to that fisherman is important. Like you can understand the value of your land, value in the sense the fertility of the land, the suitability of the land for a given species. How the common farmer is able to use that is the question. How the decision maker at the panchayat level, at the district level, is able to use that is the question. And that is where India has really worked well. And cyclone is a very classic example which is visible every day.
ISRO has always been an organization that has delivered. What makes the ISRO different from other research institutions in India?
I said somewhere in the presentation, first we have a vision which is shared by the leadership and by the people in the organization and the government. The second one, we value synergy, team excellence. It is one for the individuals to publish, but if you have to work as a team, that is what ISRO has shown. And when you see a launch taking place at Sriharikota, at least 500 professionals will be working there at that time. And that rocket and satellite would have been a product of another few thousands who worked for it for a few years. Nobody looks at what I get out of it, what the organization gets out of it. And the focus is on the mission. The next one, we have always tried to look at what way ISRO can contribute to the problems of the country. And that has been our priority. Otherwise, would have been in a isolated enclosure. It is not so. So we became relevant, significant for this country. So these are all the important things that we have demonstrated over the years, and that certainly will continue in the coming years too. It's a culture of working.
And finally, how much is political will important for achievements of institutions like ISRO? And is India in the right direction?
Yes, what we require is a national vision. And we had in India that national vision, the determination and the support right from the 60s till now. And I'm sure it will continue in the future too. And this is seen finally in the way the structures are there for managing the system. And this comes directly under the Prime Minister of the country, with a structure of policy making, of accountability and execution all together. And ISRO has been delivering, which is more important. So it is a kind of iterative process, and this happens. And probably only in India we have this kind of a structure. I will end up with the final statement.
Please.
25 years ago, I was in Rajasthan, in a place near Kota district. We were there to do a survey on how to use remote sensing data for the planning of the district. I got a cut in my finger, and in the night I went to a private nursing home there in Kota district at 8 o'clock. It was owned by a young doctor. Then he saw our face. He thought they are coming not from that region, somewhere else. So we asked, etc., all the details. And finally we said, we are from ISRO, we came for this purpose. So he told, I will not take any fees from you because you are doing something for this country. And that was his assessment sitting in Kota in 1995. And so we live in the heart of Indians because space technology is useful for the humanity.
That was a
Thank
great
you.
note. Conclude a
Thank you.
science speech.
Thank you.
Science. Thank you very much,